Greetings and salutations, travelers, and welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And also, welcome to the next episode in our How to Play series called Laws of the Multiverse. Today we have the perks and flaws to cover. These are fun little customizations that function like miniature feats, or perhaps half feats, and act as counterparts to each other. Obviously, the perks represent the desirable side of customization, and flaws the undesirable. This means that not just your character's personality, strengths, and backstory, but also their weaknesses play a part in choosing from these options. Particularly intelligent adversaries could even learn these personality flaws and exploit them. Wink wink, nudge nudge to the LMs out there. At character creation, you can choose up to 2 perks and up to 2 flaws. Note that this is not a requirement for your character, though. For example, someone playing an especially young or inexperienced character could opt to not pick any perks or flaws if they want to really play into their character's lack of life lessons. Chapter 5 has information on all of what could be called the core perks and flaws. There are 35 perks and 31 flaws listed in the chapter, and they provide a lot of choice to those playing. However, those wanting more customization can work with their LM to make their own perks and flaws. Since doing so can be a little tricky, the book provides 3 guidelines for doing this. These guidelines mainly focus on making perks, so that's where we'll start. 1. Perks should provide non-combat effects. Limiting perks in this way helps distinguish them from feats, banes, and boons, which are meant to be the primary ways for players to boost their character's combat abilities. Don't think this makes them weak, however, since perks like disease immunity and ageless are pretty good in a multitude of ways. 2. Try to make your proposed perk limited to a specific type of task or a relatively rare situation. Consider the Artisan perk. It provides expertise in just a single craft and thus is good to consult for creating perks focused on a specialized task. For the specific situation guideline, the Merchant perk always lets you know if you're getting a good or bad deal, meaning the specific situation in which a character gains a boost would be bartering. 3. If you do want to design a perk that is more generally applicable, then the effect should be even more limited than other perks. The book uses the Idol perk as an example. That perk makes you trusted by just about anyone by calling upon your fame as a well-known public figure, but it is only allowed to be activated once per game session. Lucky is another one of those perks that is limited to once per game session, and rightly so. It is arguably one of the most powerful. To help balance out the wide-ranging application of this perk, another stipulation is placed on it, namely that the form your luck takes is up to the LM. On a personal note, we are not particularly fond of the once per game session limiter here at the IOPC, since it can be problematic with the highly variable time spans that sessions can cover. A single session can cover anywhere from a minute or 2 of combat, 2 months, or in extreme cases, years, of in-game time. We suggest that both the LM and players be open to bending these limitations on perks when necessary. When we cover homebrewing content, we'll present some options for dealing with this in your games. When it comes to making custom flaws, balancing them is actually easier. Yes, the above rules can help guide the process, but because it is the player that chooses when a flaw activates, they'll not feel like they're losing character agency if something bad happens when they play into the flaw. It keeps everyone actively involved in the story of their character. This seems like a good time to briefly talk about what activating a perk or flaw means. For perks, because they provide specific bonuses based on the situation and how often they can be activated, it is important to pay attention to their description. Some perks, like the attractive perk, can be activated as many times as the situation merits, while the Whisperer of the Wild perk is limited to a much more specific sphere of influence. In either case, the LM has final say on if the perk can activate or not, but usually, if the narrative would be well served through its activation, it should trigger without a hitch. Activating a flaw happens in a much similar way as perks, but, as we mentioned earlier, the player controls when the flaw triggers. For example, a PC with the greedy flaw could walk right by an open cash register without the flaw triggering. But whenever they are involved in negotiations with employers about pay, the player could choose to activate the flaw, thus providing nuance to the character and their motivations. The LM still gets to have final say on what the results of the player's flaw activation might be, but the player determines when it is played into. This means not only that the player is in full control of the expression of their flaw, but also to a degree the severity of that flaw. Now by raw, or rules as written, when a player does this, they can gain 1 legend point. Strictly speaking, this can only happen once per game session per flaw, and has a heavy dependence on if the LM thinks that the narrative situation that results warrants the reward. However, from playing in Open Legend ourselves, and watching other groups, it is evident that legend points, and how to award them, is one of the most homebrewed things in the community, so take this with a grain of salt. We'll cover legend points more in a devoted episode later on, so keep an eye out for that. Something unique about perks and flaws that keeps them from being just another set of feats is that, depending upon the actions of a player's character over the course of a campaign, their perks and flaws can change to reflect how a character might have matured from their successes and failures. These alterations could be proposed by the player, the Legend Master, or both, though the LM does get final say over if the mechanical changes are made. Take our previous example of a fighter that lost his hand in an epic battle. The character may have begun the campaign with the hot-tempered flaw and the brute perk, but after such an emotionally charged moment, the player and the LM might feel a shift in the character's mindset would be appropriate, especially if it was his hot-tempered nature that got him into that dire position in the first place. To represent this mechanically, the character might replace hot-headed with disabled to represent having learned his lesson the hard way, and change his brute perk, which might have been picked to complement hot-tempered, to extraordinary presence. This type of malleability of the character mechanically is something that can really add a lot of depth to the stories being told, allowing the narrative and mechanics of Open Legend games to be more closely linked. Our final point about perks and flaws is a really simple but really important one. There is no limit to the amount of perks and flaws that a character can have. Yes, you heard that right. A character can have as many perks and flaws as the player and LM find appropriate. Now, that last qualifier is vital to consider. Both the player and LM have to agree on allowing a player to gain extra perks and flaws through the story. A solid and reasonable example of this would be one that the book presents, namely, the LM awarding the characters the perk Profession Sailor, after they spend several months sailing a ship during their quest. These can be fun little rewards for characters diligent enough to invest in constructive things during their downtime. Alright, perks and flaws are finally done. We know it has been a while between these last Laws of the Multiverse videos, and we appreciate your patience. Next video, we will be talking about equipment, and how Open Legend deals with lugging around all that loot your characters amass during their adventures. As usual, Kane, Levi, Dan from Avenue Studios, and the Great Mustache were helpful in the creation of this script, so a special thank you goes out to them. To stay up to date on all the things the Inn of Planar Crossroads has going on, including the progress of this series, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're still gradually mirroring some of our content from YouTube onto BitChute, so you're able to like, share, and subscribe on either one of those sites as you wish. Please put any questions, comments, and/or observations in the appropriate spaces below. If you like this content and feel it worthy of financial support, we not only have a Patreon and Subscribestar for doing just that, but now we also have a cryptocurrency support option via the Brave browser and its basic attention token. Remember, this channel is supported solely by travelers and viewers like you. That is all for now, travelers. Thank you so much for watching until the end. And, as always, have a great day, God bless, and enjoy.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.